Sometimes we want to plot two totally different variables against a common axis. So for example, in this climograph data, we have rainfall and the temperature of the location of Iquitos, Peru, graphed against the month of the year. So the rainfall is measured in millimeters and the temperature is measured in Celsius. And obviously, we can't plot those on the same axis. So we have to have two vertical axes, one which has units of millimeters of precipitation, the other which has temperature in Celsius. And so typically, we want to put our data in columns. We want to arrange our data in columns. But this table is arranged in rows. So for example, the data for Los Angeles is row 17. And what we want to do now is we want to plot that data. So notice when we go to plot it, it's going to be looking a little messy to begin with. If I click on rainfall and then I shift click on the last entry of the temperature, which is going to be D18, I can now go to graph it. I'll say insert a chart. And the data is plotted accurately, but looks totally messy and mostly uninterpretable. So if I click on the setup here and I go to the very bottom and say I'd like to switch the rows and columns, in other words, as if I had put the data in columns to begin with, now the data looks more reasonable. The only problem now is that the data is not labeled. We don't have any indication as to what the x-axis is. So we're going to add an x-axis. We're going to click on the x-axis right here. And we don't want to put the rainfall or the temperature. That would be meaningless. What we want to do is we want to select a range that wasn't previously highlighted. Click here. And then select range of months across the top there. And by highlighting from B4 over to N4, it's now going to give us the months of the year on the x-axis. So now we have the months of the year on the x-axis. However, we still just have one vertical axis, a left vertical axis. So how do we change it from one vertical axis to two vertical axes? So the way to do that is to go to the Customize tool, click on the Series option here, and you'll notice that first option here is left axis. So let's say I wanted to put the rainfall on the left axis. So I'm going to choose rainfall in millimeters. I'm going to put it on the x-axis and I'll color code it blue. And now I want to change the temperature here, and I'm going to put the temperature in red on the right axis. And so now we have something that makes more sense as long as we understand that this blue axis over here is for rainfall and this is going to be for temperature. So what are we going to do for that? We need to first put our axes titles. So we'll do that here, and we'll say Climograph Los Angeles, California. And then we need to change the horizontal axis title, and that's just going to be month of the year. And then you can see that is going to be labeled across the bottom. Now we're going to change the vertical axis title. And the first one is going to be rainfall millimeters. And then we're going to change the right vertical axis to read temperature in Celsius. So now the graph is correct, but still it's a little misleading because we're using bars to represent both. And so what we're going to do is we're going to change the nature of this graph by clicking on the More menu here and editing the chart and say we'd like to change that now to a combination of a line and a bar chart. So I click on that, and now when we move this to its own sheet by clicking on the More tool and saying move to its own sheet, we now have a climograph for Los Angeles, which is interpretable, that has two different vertical axes, one for rainfall, one for temperature, plotted in two different fashions, one as bars and one as a line.